Hey everybody, this is a quick video to provide some more instruction on the Human Demography Project that I introduced while I was away in Vermont, as well as to provide some tips on how to use Excel if you've never used Microsoft Excel before. So in class, there are a couple documents that got passed out, and I'm going to go through those quickly just so we're all on the same page. The first thing that you should have done is taking a look at this population growth problems worksheet, and it just reviews the three formulas that you need to know in order to do this project effectively. You should be familiar with these already because we did practice with them in class previously. But the first one is global population growth, which looks at the crude birth rate and the crude death rate, which is the births and deaths per 1,000 individuals. You subtract them and divide by 10. The second formula is national population growth rate, which incorporates migration, immigration, which adds to the population, and emigration, which removes from the population. Remember that all four of those values need to be per 1,000 individuals. CBR, CDR, immigration, and emigration all need to be per 1,000, so you probably have to set up a proportion for those. And lastly, doubling time, which is 70 divided by the growth rate as a percentage, gives you the number of years it takes to double. And there's a couple practice problems below. I'll post the answer key as well. And the reason that I start with these is because you're going to need these in order to do the project effectively. So you want to be comfortable with these formulas, okay? On the back of this sheet is the Demography Project handout. This is worth 45 points, so it's basically a test. And what the goal of this is to look at the impact of TFR, the total fertility rate, the average number of babies per woman, and what impact that has on the doubling time for a population. So you're going to pick 10 countries and you're going to do this analysis. You need to pick one country from each continent: North and Central America, South America, Africa, Asia, and Europe. And then one country from the Caribbean, one country from Oceania, and then that gives you 7 countries. So the last 3, you can pick any 3 countries you want from any part of the world. Which country should you pick? Whatever you want. You could pick countries you visited, countries you want to visit, countries you've never heard of, countries where your family, your ancestors come from. It doesn't matter. Pick any countries that are interesting to you. And then we're going to get some data to calculate the doubling time, and we'll find the TFR in the data sheet and we'll calculate the doubling time using the data sheet. I'll show you the data sheet in a second. A note: if after you're doing your calculations, you find out the doubling time is negative, you're probably going to want to replace that with a different country because that country is shrinking in population size. So it's going to be kind of funky if you do that. So the goal is to calculate the doubling time and figure out the TFR. And we can do that using this data sheet, which is on Google Classroom. The top of it looks like this. It's called the World Population Data Sheet. The one for 2023 isn't out yet, so I'm using last year's. Gives you some stats on the world, and this one is a little bit COVID specific because COVID's and human population dynamics kind of go hand in hand. So the first page, they talk a little bit about some COVID stats, which is kind of interesting. The impact of the pandemic on fertility is actually not as big as we thought it might be. They give some stats on the world. So they break the world up into different categories of more developed versus less developed versus least developed, high income versus middle income versus low income. And they give you all these stats for these different sort of segments of the world. They look at the population size in millions. They look at the CBR, the CDR, net migration rate, which is the immigration plus the emigration, immigration minus emigration. People coming in and versus people going out. If it's a positive number, that means, hey, for every 1,000 individuals, I have 2 people coming in. If it's a negative number, it means I've got people leaving. Why does it say -0? I don't know, it just does. It gives you population projections for 2035 and 2050. It gives you the infant mortality rate, total fertility rate. It gives you the population proportions for people under age 15 or age 65. It gives you stats on family planning and contraceptives, life expectancy at birth broken down by sex, population with HIV/AIDS, percent of the people who live in the urban areas, the amount of farmable land per person, and basically what is the amount of money an average person has to spend, which is GNI per capita, PPP. They also have some interesting stats about COVID. So in this case, they've broken the world up into these different categories, but further down the list, they break them up by region. So as I flick through these first few pages, it's all the different regions of Africa. okay? Every country in the world is here, and you can find stats on all these countries. So Botswana is here. It gives me the population, 2.6 million. It tells me that there are 24 births per 1,000 people and 9 deaths per 1,000 people. Hey, we can use that to do some calculations. Don't forget migration. Eswatini, never heard of that country, has a negative migration rate. That means that for every 1,000 people in the country, 4 people are leaving, right? And it gives us all these other stats, infant mortality and total fertility rate. All of these stats are going to be useful, not in the calculations, but in the analysis. So you need to pick your 10 countries first, make a data table, and figure out what data do I need to calculate the growth rate and the doubling time. Total fertility rate is given to you. You don't need to calculate that. So you just plug that in from your sheet here into your data table. But you will need to use births, deaths, and migration to calculate the doubling time. But hey, we just did a bunch of practice with that, right? So that should be easy. Make a data table, set up your data table, and then we're going to need to do some calculations. This is where Excel can come in handy, and I'm going to show you a couple tips on how to use Excel if you've never used it before. And Excel is a really powerful tool. It can actually do math for you. So I've got this imaginary data set here, column A versus column B, and let me show you how I can do math in Excel. So the way I do math in Excel is I click on a cell and I type an equal sign. That's going to tell the computer that, hey, I'm about to type an equation. Ooh, fancy. And in this case, what I want to do is I want to add up these two cells. So if I just highlight both of them and I click enter, all it does is just copy and paste the two cells. That's not very useful. But Excel has a wide variety of formulas I could use. I press equal and I press sum. I type in sum. I click on that. And then I highlight the cells I want, close parentheses. Hey, look, it'll add them up for me. I could also do it by hand and click on one cell, type a plus sign, click on the other cell. Same thing. Now the beauty of this is, let's say I've got a data set with all the columns go, or the rows go all the way down. Maybe I've got 50 data sets. I need to add up these two columns. Well, when I have my formula here, which you can see the formula if you click up here at the top, this formula in this cell in the bottom right hand square of the cell is a little green square. If I hover over that, my cursor turns black. I click that, I drag, and it will apply the formula to all of these other cells. So I'm adding these two cells together here, but in this cell, it automatically is adding these two together. In this cell, it's automatically adding these two together. So this is a really powerful tool to make. You only have to type in the equation once, then you click and drag and it will do it automatically. Another example of a function I use often is average. Click average. I highlight the cells I want to take an average of. I close the parentheses, and there it's giving me the average of those two. I can find that little square, click and drag. It will give me the average. I could do it the old-fashioned way. How do we calculate average? We add up our two numbers and then we divide by 2, right? Because I've got two numbers, but make sure you have your parentheses. Got to watch that PEMDAS, and then you click and drag. Same deal, okay? Now, one thing to be careful about here is that this looks like the number 40, but it's not, okay? It's an equation. So if I were to copy and paste these numbers somewhere else, hey, where'd they go? Someone stole my numbers. No, you got to remember, you didn't copy and paste a number. You copied and pasted a formula that is based on the cells paired with it. So this formula is paired with these cells, which are empty. So when you copy and paste, you have to be really careful about that. If you're not paying attention, you might end up screwing up your whole data set. So when you highlight formula and you copy it and you paste it, a little clipboard appears in the bottom right-hand corner. Click on that and click values, paste values. And that will just paste the numbers without pasting the formulas, okay? So how does this help us? Well, let's say we've got a bunch of countries, okay? A, B, C, D, E. I've looked in that population data sheet and I've pulled out the CBR, the CDR, and the migration rate. I need to calculate the growth rate. Well, I can do that. Type the equal sign, the births minus the deaths plus the migration rate. Remember, migration is the immigrants, people coming in, minus the immigrants. So a positive number is adding to the population and a negative number is subtracting from the population. So you can just add it. And I put all of that in parentheses and I divide by 10. Oh, there's a typo. Whoops. I did multiply. I want divide. So change that to a slash. And I get 1.1%. I can even press this percent button. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. Never mind. Pretend that never happened. 1.1%. Okay. How do we calculate doubling time? Well, it's 70 divided by 1.1. Whoops. I didn't press an equal sign, so it didn't know I was typing an equation. 70 divided by, and I click on that cell. You could type in 1.1 here, but by clicking on the cell, it's going to allow me to click and drag everything. So, hey, this is 63 years doubling time at 1.1%. I highlight both cells, click and drag, bam. It's just done the math for me. It calculated all the growth rates, calculated all the doubling times. Okay, so this will make your work a lot easier. You will have to make a graph. You can do that clicking insert and going to charts. You're going to want to make a scatter plot. Okay, so you want to highlight your X and your Y variables and then insert a scatter plot. I'll be back in class and we'll have a couple days to work on this if you have other questions, but that should get you through the bulk of the work. Once you set up your table, you've made your graph, you've got a trend line and all that stuff, you've labeled all the data points, then there are some follow-up questions. Some of these questions ask you to make another scatter plot by hand or to use another data set. I've got some data on the ecological footprints on Classroom. It's all pretty self-explanatory. It's all on Classroom. When you're done, it should be typed, not handwritten, double-spaced. I want a hard copy. Please include the data table, scatter plots, answers to the questions, and make sure you staple it all together. If you get stuck on how to use Excel, for example, a lot of kids will get stuck on how to label data points with their country name so I can identify the data points on your chart. Mess around on Google, ask Google. You'll be surprised how easy it is to find an answer there. Okay, so that's a summary of the project. I think that's everything I needed to cover. If you have questions, ask your peers, work it out, and then I'll be back soon and we can work together. Thanks.